This morning, I want to talk to you, and the title for my talk, if you need titles, is called The Call and the Purpose. The Call and the Purpose. And when I was a teenager, when I was on youth weekends away, I had many hobbies. I've been that kind of person. I have lots of hobbies. But one of my favorite hobbies to do, one of my favorite pastimes as a teenager, was coarse fishing. You may not know what coarse fishing is. It's fishing in fresh water. And my friends and I, we would spend hours of our life obsessing about catching tiny fish this big. We'd spend tens of pounds on fishing rods, and we'd hours and hours fishing and catching nothing. And one winter we went out to where we usually go fishing. It was called the canal, because it was a canal. And usually we'd go in the wider part of the canal and fish for, fantasize about catching giant pike as big as me. Never would catch that. And you'd see little fish kind of looking at you going, ha ha, swimming away. Once it was freezing, it was December, we thought, let's go to a different place. One of my friends said, come, we'll go up to a different part of the canal. It was narrower. And we went there, and in an hour and a half, we each caught 30 fish. It was incredible. It was unbelievable. My prayer for you guys and for us as a church is that we might hear God's call to come and follow him and to see people caught for him, because he's altogether lovely. He's altogether wonderful. And a relationship with Jesus, to fish for people, is one of the greatest purposes you can have in your life. Our reading today is Matthew 4. We're in a series on Matthew's Gospel. So if you've got a Bible, turn to Matthew 4, 18 to 22. It's going to come up on the screen as well. It says this: As Jesus was walking beside the Sea of Galilee, he saw two brothers, Simon called Peter and his brother Andrew. They were casting a net into the lake, for they were fishermen. Come, follow me, Jesus said, and I will send you out to fish for people. At once they left their nets and followed him. Going on from there, he saw two other brothers, James, son of Zebedee, and his brother John. They were in a boat with their father Zebedee, preparing their nets. Jesus called them, and immediately they left the boat and their father and followed him. There's two things I want us to think about over the next little while I'm preaching. I want to pull out of this passage. And the first thing is this, is that Jesus calls us to follow him. Jesus calls you and he calls me to follow him. We're in a season of a church, and it's, on one hand, is it's an amazing season. A few weeks ago, we baptized 13 people in our services, and over the following week and a half, we've had another 6 or 7 people say they want to be baptized. They want to put their trust and their faith in Jesus. And just last week, after our 11:30 service, 2 people came up to me and said, we'd like to follow Jesus. We want to be Christians. It's an amazing season. God is adding to our number almost daily. It's also a really hard season. Many of you know the Milnes, and we've been praying for them while they've been journeying through an incredibly difficult part of their life. And this picture of one train track, things are amazing. The other train track, things are really difficult, is like a picture of the Christian life. It's a picture of life in and of itself. Maybe you feel like there's a load of great things happening. Maybe you feel like there's a load of difficult things happening. It could be like that relationship. It's amazing. Oh, that relationship. Oh, it's really difficult. That boss, aren't they so great? That boss, really difficult. Not here, of course. Those kids, aren't they just incredible? Oh, those kids, why won't they sleep? That colleague, that friend, that work situation, whatever it is, sometimes things are great, sometimes things are really hard. That's life. And our guide as we're going through this season as a church, and as you're going through a season that could have its highs and could have its lows. At the moment, we're looking at the Gospel of Matthew, and we're trying to understand this person of Jesus Christ through this Gospel of Matthew. And if you've got time, do go back to the start. You could probably catch up on Matthew 1 to 4 while I'm speaking today, actually. But do go back to the start and read Matthew's Gospel from the start to the finish if you have some time. A few weeks ago, we went back to the start of Matthew's Gospel and we learned about how your story and my story, our story as a church, it has significance and completion in the person of Jesus Christ. God calls his people into baptism. We learned about that, and how God calls his people often into a place of wilderness, a place where he can speak to them, a place where they can hear his voice. And today, we hear Jesus' first words of instruction to those who are going to follow him, his closest followers, his disciples. In our passage today, Jesus sees Peter, Andrew, James, and John at work. They were fishermen. They fished, they used nets, they were doing their normal day-to-day life. And he said to them, "Come, follow me." And it's interesting in Matthew's Gospel because we get a presentation of Jesus Christ. And Jesus Christ in Matthew's Gospel, he has some really hard things to say, really tough things. He says things like, it's harder for a camel, you've seen a camel, they're big, to enter the eye of a needle than it is for a rich man to enter the kingdom of heaven. There are really difficult things that Jesus says in Matthew's Gospel, but for those of us who would want to follow Jesus, for those of us who'd want to be receptive to his voice, these difficult things, we don't actually hear those words spoken at us. They're spoken towards us as a challenge, calling us up. And we hear other words. We hear these words where he says, "Come, follow me." Where he says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and heavy burdened, and I will give you rest." Jesus doesn't speak to us manipulatively. He doesn't speak to us harshly. He doesn't cancel us. Jesus says these words to his disciples that are going to change their life. Come and follow me. The call of Jesus isn't to shape up and be better. Jesus isn't there with his red pen marking our pages, marking our homework. It isn't to do lots, to understand everything. It isn't to be smart. It isn't to be great. It isn't to be successful. It isn't to be creative. It isn't to be this or to be that. The call of Jesus to you and to me this morning is to follow him. To follow him. It sounds so simple. It can be easily forgotten. That is the call. That's it. But we need to be able to hear his voice. So how do we do that? Well, there's lots of different ways to hear God's voice. And there's loads of things. You can read the Bible, pray every day, get some decent Christian content, come to church, worship with others, take communion, serve the poor. There's loads of stuff that we can do. There's lots of things. Just think about tomorrow, though. Tomorrow's coming. It's called Monday. Many of you know about Monday, and it comes every week. And if you're like me, you lie in bed and Monday comes and you go, great, I'm awake. I can start the day well. I can start as I mean to go on for the rest of the... And you fall asleep. And then, oh no, everything's out of kilter. But I want to encourage you, if you're here today and you know that Monday's coming, which it is, tomorrow, maybe you're already reading Bible in 1 year. Why don't you have a little look at starting your day with the Psalm from Bible in 1 year. It's an app, you can get it on your phone, or just start with Psalm 1. Just start with one thing. Spend some time in God's presence, reading his word, spending some time with him, and open yourself. As you do these things, you open your ears almost to hear God's call afresh in your life for your Monday. So just start with Monday. Now you might have loads of time. There's loads of different things you can do. Come and have a chat with one of the team. We can point you in the direction of some other things. But do try and start tomorrow with a psalm. Head on to Psalm 1 and start with that. And as you do those things, you hear God's voice. And it might not be an audible voice, but you'll be open to hear him speaking to you. And you'll hear things like this. You'll hear him say things like this. You are a new creation. The old has gone, the new has come. Before I formed you in the womb, I knew you. Before you were born, I set you apart. I anointed you. Your life is hid with Christ. The boundary lines have fallen for you in pleasant places. Surely you have a delightful inheritance. The first thing that we can pull out of this passage is that Jesus calls us to follow him, to follow into life with him. The second thing that Jesus does that we can pull out of this passage is that he calls us into a purpose. Jesus calls you and me into a purpose. The disciples' response is interesting because it's immediate. There's no planning, there's no questions, there's no umming and ahhing, there's no pros and cons. They put down their nets and they follow him with these words of instruction from Jesus. I will send you out to fish for people. Jesus' words, they're captivating and they're purposeful. He doesn't just call us out of something. He calls us into something else. He tells Peter and Andrew, follow me and I will send you out to fish for people. Their old job, fishing for people, was replaced with their old job, fishing for fish, was replaced with a new job, a new purpose, bringing people into God's kingdom. And this is not a new thing for the disciples or for Jesus. This is an old pattern. And it's not a new thing for us today. This is a pattern that God has always gone about, calling people from their day-to-day lives into reaching the world for him. The model of the Old Testament follows this. In fact, Matthew bases his gospel on the Old Testament. God creates the world. He created it good. There's a fall. Things go wrong. And ultimately, God's people, they find themselves enslaved and trapped in a place that's not their home. But God leads them out through the Red Sea, through baptism, if you like, into the wilderness. And in the wilderness, and you can go and read Exodus, it's a great place to understand this. God speaks to his people and he gives them instruction for how he wants them to live. And Jesus is doing that to his disciples here. He's giving them instruction, giving them a purpose for their lives. God's plan for his people in the Old Testament was for them to go out with a purpose, to go fishing. Perhaps the Old Testament phrase that they would use is to be a blessing, to bless the world, to make the world a better place. And this is the pattern of the Christian faith today. It takes us individually and corporately as a people. So like St. Peter's, he takes us out of something bad and hard, and he takes us to a place where we can hear his voice. And like the disciples, he says to you and to me individually in our day-to-day life, and he says to us as a church, it's time to go fishing. Go and bless the world. Bring the people closer to God the Father. Bring God the Father closer to the people. Quite simply, that is what it means to be a blessing. It's like you go and you hold God and his heart for the world in one hand, his heart for love, for justice, for equity, for truth, for righteousness, for holiness, for mercy in one hand. And in the other hand, you hold governments, kingdoms, rulers, the sick, the broken, the poor, your colleagues, your friends, your family. And you bring them closer to each other. And on the cross, Jesus enacted this perfectly for us. Because on the cross, Jesus, he holds God's hand for mercy and judgment and justice and equity and peace and righteousness and holiness in one hand. And he holds you and me and all of the times that we've messed up and we've broken, this world and all of the times that the world has broken us. And he holds those two things together and he draws them together. And he says, I've got these people and I've got your heart, Lord, and I know that you love them. And he draws them together. And the call of Jesus in Matthew's gospel is to do the same, for you and me to do that. Now, we get opportunities to do this day to day. Start with Monday, tomorrow. What do you know that's coming tomorrow that's difficult? Maybe it's a relationship. Maybe it's something at work. Maybe it's something that's going on at home with someone else. There's two ways that you can act. You can either dig your heels in, or you could bring about the things of God. You could pray for that person. You could point, maybe you could fess up and confess and say sorry. Or maybe you could point out something that's actually really difficult and hurting other people around you. By doing that, you're standing in that gap that Jesus did on the cross, and you're enacting that. You're being a blessing. You're bringing people towards the Father, towards his heart. And it's not just the thing that we do individually. It's not just something that you're going to go off and do tomorrow by yourself. We do it as a church together as well. We do all of these acts. They line up and they join into this amazing picture across this city of us loving and serving and being a blessing to our city. But also we do things together as a church. When we go to Focus, it's like we're a family together. And this family, we all go and we're on mission really in Brighton. But we also go and we get recharged as a family together so that when we come back, we're ready to go again. And there's things that we do, our team, on a Sunday that we do together. Like you walk through the doors on Sunday and someone meets you and says, hello, welcome to church. And they're doing this thing. It's not just like it's a nice welcome. It is nice. It's nice, isn't it, to have someone smile at you on your way into church. But it's also they're mirroring something of God's eternal kingdom. They're saying, hi, welcome to church. And in that word church, they're saying, welcome to God's family. You've come in and maybe at home you're feeling alone and you don't feel like you're part of a family. Here you're part of a family. Here's a cup of coffee, here's a seat. Let's sing some songs together. Let's worship Jesus. Let's put him up on a throne. Let's lift him high. Let's remember that life's got its challenges, but let's put Jesus on the throne and let's put him in his rightful place. And maybe some of these challenges he's going to help us out with. We've got little kids as part of our kids' church, and we've got teenagers, and we're serving them by teaching them the faith. We're blessing them. We're fishing for people. We're doing it together as a team. God's calling us, St. Peter's, to reach this world, and we're doing it all together. We've got this little phrase that we use. It's to love God with a passion and to love people on purpose. And that is what we're doing. There is a bigger hope, though, because if you're like me, I'm slightly observant. I'm not that observant, but I can see one or two things. If you look at the world as we do these things, if you look at this church as we do these things, there are things that happen that quite frankly shouldn't happen. There are things that we really don't want to happen, like injustices, things that it just feels wrong. It feels like there's something wrong in the order of the world. You don't need me to tell you what they are, but there are things that aren't quite right. But as Christians, as we do these things, we're going to have communion in a minute, and we're going to think about these things. But as we're serving, as we're out about in our city, as we're here on a Sunday, as we're praying for each other, as we're serving the poor on a Thursday at Safe Haven, as we're inviting our friends to Alpha, what we're doing is we aren't just doing it for now. It's like a window into the future. We're going to have communion in a minute, and as we take communion, it's also like a window into the future, that Jesus' body was broken, his blood was poured out for you and for me. And in that imperfection, we jump into a future reality where God is going to right every wrong. Because as Christians, we don't just do this stuff and then hope for the best. We do this stuff because we know the best is coming. We know Jesus is coming back. He's going to return. There is an ultimate hope. Jesus is going to bless the world. Revelation 21 says this. And I heard a loud voice from the throne saying, look, God's dwelling place is now among the people, and he will dwell among them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them, and he will be their God. This is true for us today. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. There will be no more death or mourning, crying or pain, for the old order of things has passed away. He who is seated on the throne says this, I am making everything new. We do this with an eternal hope. We look forward to the day when the dead will be raised, when every wrong thing will be made right, where every sad thing will come untrue. The great shadow that's across the world will depart. It'll be like laughter, and we've not heard laughter like it before. It's going to be like music that we've not heard before. It's going to be like water on a dry and parched land. As we take communion today, you can know that eternal hope. And as you step out, as you take some time to hear God's voice, to say, come, follow me. As you follow him into that purpose, you can know the eternal hope that you have.